Hello, Link 1111. We will be talking about phonetics today, and I will try to squeeze in a couple of lessons of phonetics into one video. So, what is phonetics? Phonetics is the scientific study of speech sounds. Phone means sound or phone. It used to be phone in Greek, which means a sound. So it's a scientific study of speech sounds mainly. It's also a scientific study of the way um, intonation is produced. But for our purposes, we will focus on speech sounds only. It consists of three main subfields: articulatory phonetics, which is how speech sounds are produced by using tongue, lips, vocal folds, um, even nose, airflow, right, lungs, and so on and so forth. All of these articulators. And acoustic phonetics, which is how speech sounds are transmitted from producer to perceiver, from speaker to listeners, right? How you perceive speech sounds as I'm speaking. Phonetics studies this. And finally, there is a perceptual phonetics, which is a branch of phonetics that studies how listeners understand which speech sounds are being produced. What you will learn in this module is mainly phonetic transcription, basics of articulatory phonetics, that is how speech sounds are, what we use, how speech sounds are produced, right? What we use, what are the articulators that we are using, what are the speech organs that we are using for production of sounds, and how to produce speech sounds of English, right? So we will learn all speech sounds of English, and we will forget about English alphabet for the purposes of phonetics and phonology mainly. So first things first, phonetic transcription. The primary tool of phonetic science is phonetic transcription. The basic idea of the phonetic transcription is to represent speech as a sequence of segments. So what we're trying to do is to represent speech by marking down each speech sound, right? And English spelling does that for us, right? But there are so many issues with English spelling, which we are going to see very soon. So we need some kind of a different alphabet. Um, and we will see which alphabet that is. This alphabet needs to represent segments, individual consonants and vowels, right? And a deep thought question for you: what kind of alphabet should we use? How about the English alphabet? And I kind of gave you an answer to this question. English alphabet, no, but which one should we use? The trouble with English is that some letters represent more than one different sound. For example, C in recall is actually K sound, right? Not C. Receive is actually S sound. Gear and siege, this G letter represents two sounds, G and J, which are completely different. Some letters represent no sounds at all, such as receive and use. Use, there is no use or receive, right? There is no letter, there is no sound there. Then sometimes two letters represent just one sound, such as recall and phonetics. Um, double L is just one L, recall, or L sound. PH is phonetics, or the first sound, right? Some letters represent two or more sounds at once, such as, for example, tax, right? X, this X symbol actually represents two sounds, K and S, X, X, right? This U sound represents Y and U, or U letter actually represents two sounds, which are Y and U. Y and U. Also, cough, women, nation, and the same sound can be represented by many different letters. So now the other way around, shy, for example, for sh, mission, double S, machine, C and H, special, C and I, caution, T and I, and so on and so forth. What I will quickly draw your attention to an anecdote that was devised by George Bernard Shaw. He said that we could write fish, and I'll try to insert text box here, fish, by writing it like this. How so, right? He said that English spelling is ridiculous because of the fact that you could basically take f in cough, right? Put it here. Take o in women and put it here, like, and it would be a sound e. And nation, sh, from nation, and there you go. Cough, f, women, I, nation, sh, fish. That's how ridiculous English spelling is to George Bernard Shaw, and this is one of his famous quotes. The English have no respect for their language and will not teach their children to speak it. They cannot spell it because they have nothing to spell it with but an old foreign alphabet, of which only the consonants, and not all of them, have any agreed speech value. Consequently, no man can teach himself what it should sound like from reading it, and it is impossible for an Englishman to open his mouth without making some other Englishman despise him. I think he is going too far, but for our purposes, we don't want to have this kind of ambiguity. So I want to have a representation of one sound and one symbol. No ambiguity at all, and George Bernard Shaw noticed that very well. So the solution is to use a phonetic alphabet. In a phonetic alphabet, sounds and symbols have a one-to-one relationship to each other, meaning each symbol represents one sound and each sound is represented by one symbol, right? One to one. It goes both ways. For example, I don't want to see this. Oops, went too far. So I don't want to see this, as in shy, for example. I don't want to see one sound, which is sh, being represented by sh, or being represented by double s, or being represented by ch, and so on and so forth. I want sh to be represented by only one symbol and consistently by one symbol. The use of phonetic alphabet to represent speech is called phonetic transcription. In our phonetic alphabet of choice is the International Phonetic Alphabet, or the IPA. It's not beer anymore, it's the tool that we are going to use to represent speech, to represent it consistently and according to the International Phonetic Alphabet principles. So, what's the IPA? The IPA is presided over by the International Phonetic Association. It was created in 1886 and is still active and evolving today. This is just an example of the IPA from the last MF, Maître Phonétique, which was French, name for the journal that was published until 71, I think, and it was then abandoned, right? So they published all of their articles in this journal using the IPA, or the International Phonetic Alphabet. This is Paul Passy, one of the founders of the International Phonetic Association, and for fun, I'll just read the first sentence. As members will know, this is the last number of the MF in its present form. Our journal was published for the first time in 1889, though previously, from 1886, it had appeared as the phonetic teacher, and so on and so forth. You can pick out the accent, right, which is the British or the dialect or the variety, which is the British variety here, and you can see that it's very convenient way of representing sounds, but when it comes to reading, we have our own ways of reading, and that's why it failed, right? We have our own alphabets and we rely on those alphabets, right? Um, some IPA principles that we should be aware of are a couple. I'll just mention three. There are more, but I'll just mention three. The alphabet should consist as much as possible of the ordinary letters of the Roman alphabet. In assigning values to the Roman letters, international usage should decide. Example, vowel in English, B is transcribed with E. So basically we are using Roman letters for this alphabet, and all the letters should be based on Roman letters. The more familiar we are with Roman letters, the better, because of the tradition, right? IPA was founded by people who use Roman alphabet. And Roman here means English alphabet, so don't be afraid of the name. There should be a separate letter for each distinctive sound. So each sound needs to have a symbol, right? And sound contrast can be shown to exist in a language by finding minimal pairs, right? So these are the three main principles of the IPA. And how do we know whether the sound is different from the other sound in a language? Well, we use minimal pairs. A minimal pair consists of two words that have different meanings, which differ from each other in only one sound. Some minimal pairs in English are bit, bit, beat and bead, for example, with t and d. Also boat and boot, which are vowels, right? O and U. Carburetor and carburetor, K and G. And a series like this, or similar series like bit and sit and fit and shit and so on and so forth, would be a minimal set, like here T, B, K, C, V, and so on and so forth. However, there is a problem. The IPA must be able to represent all the contrasts between sounds that are found in all the languages of the world, including some which we cannot easily hear. So an English example would be contrast between bit and bit. We hear these as different. And if we said bit and bit, there would be no contrast. However, in Thai, which is another language, we have ba, pa, and pa. And let's see if we can hear the difference between these. Yeah, just a second. Okay. Let's see now. Still not working. Okay. Because I included different let me just okay, yeah. So anyways, you don't have to listen to these. This is ba, this is pa, and this is pa, where there is a puff of air, and they all mean different, and it's very difficult for us to hear the difference, although Thai speakers hear them. So we need to be able to represent the difference regardless of whether we can hear it or not, and that's why we are practicing, right? We are linguists who are practicing this. And something closer to home, how about dawn and dawn? Are they different to you or not? That's a question for you Canadians. Some technical terms that we need to be aware of there are three of those. A phone is any sound that is used in speech. So basically any sound used out there we can call phone, like phone, which means sound in Greek. A phoneme is a contrastive sound in a language, so that's very important. It needs to contrast with some other sounds. And an allophone is a phonetic variant of a phoneme. Different allophones often occur in specific contexts, like as we will see the analogies with allomorphs, or when we learn about allomorphs. So, for example, we hear in reality we hear t when we say top, stop, metal, mitten, bit. However, we produce all of these t's differently, and those productions are called allophones, and what we perceive is called a phoneme. So, in our native language, we perceive the phonemes that the allophones belong to, and we produce allophones, right? So we can produce top with a little bit of puff of air coming out of our mouth. Stop without a puff of air. Metal, metal, which we call a flap. This sound here, it's different from this sound here. And mitten, mitten, almost closing the air for a brief second with our vocal folds. And bit, bit, which is unreleased, mainly not releasing the tongue. Or when our tongue hits the roof of the mouth, we do not um, uh, we do not release this. We say bit and the tongue stays up. And finally, broad and narrow transcriptions. So we will be using phonetic transcription, and we will be using the International Phonetic Alphabet for that. We will transcribe sounds enclosed in brackets, right? Square brackets here. But you need to be aware of the broad and narrow transcription differences. Broad transcription represents only contrastive sounds or phonemes. Narrow transcription represents all the sounds, phones, right? It can represent as much detail as you want, right? It can represent this. But broad transcription should be representing only phonemes. And that's the general difference between the two. All right, I'll stop here for a second and move on to the next lesson, which is phonetics 2. All right, Ling 1111, we will continue with phonetics 2. And in this lecture, we will talk about English phonemes and sound producing system. So we need to learn some International Phonetic Alphabet symbols. There are symbols that are familiar to us, and I will start with consonants first. So in English, in International Phonetic Alphabet, we are using the symbol for P, which is familiar to us, and we get it for free. P as in pot, B as in bot, T as in tot, D as in dot, K as in kit, and G as in got. So pay attention to how I'm producing these. It's not P anymore, it's not B, it's just P, one sound. B, T, D, K, G. And you feel free to repeat after me, right? As I'm going through these symbols. F as in fought, V as in vote, S as in sought, Z as in zit. Pay attention to F and V. We're producing them by moving our lower lip towards our upper teeth. F, V. Then M as in man, N as in not, L as in lot, W as in walk, H as in hot, and Y as in you. So pay attention to this guy here. This is very important for you. Please do not read it as J anymore. It's Y, as in you, as in yellow, you too, and so on and so forth. All right. Now, unfamiliar IPA symbols. So while the previous symbols were familiar to us, there are certain symbols that are unfamiliar, and we use them in English. This one is called theta, and we use it in words such as thought, or think, right? This one is called ed, and it's used in words such as though, right? Thus, therefore, this, the letter the, or sorry, word the, which we use very often in English. It's a computer, it's the computer, right? Sh as in shot, j as in vision, and as in ring. So sh is familiar to you, it's supposed to be, as in shot, as in shape, shake, and so on and so forth. And this is j as in vision, right? Or maybe even in garage, je, right? And ring as ng, as in Mm, So as if you are producing n and g at the same time. Mm, mm, ring, ring, right? Then there is rot, r. This is upside down r, and we read it as rot. Then there is ch, as in chop, and j, as in jot, right? These two are consist of two sounds basically, t and sh at the same time. And if you try to think about it, when you produce t and very fast, as if there were one sound, then you are getting to ch, as in chop, and d and j, as in jot, right? So try and produce them like that. These two, 17 and 18, we produce by putting our tongue between our teeth, such as th, thought, and the, though. And you'll see the difference between them a bit later. Now, we have some IPA symbols that are familiar to us, and we use them for vowels. This is a vowel E, not I anymore, but E, as in heed.
Heed. Heed.
Then hod.
Hod. Hod.
And hood.
Hood. Hood.
Right? This is just me splicing these words.
E.
E. So just a vowel E, and the first part of vowel E.
E. E. E.
Second part of vowel E.
E. E.
Right? Then ah.
Ah. Ah.
Ah. So you feel free to open your mouth as much as you can for this one. Hard, hard. And say
ah.
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 And ooh, ooh.
Ooh. Ooh.
Right. So these are the symbols that we already know. Some further symbols that we are familiar with are a, as in Haid.
Haid. Haid.
Bode, o,
Bode.
I,
Bide. Bide.
ow,
Bowed. Bowed.
and oi.
Boyd. Boyd.
Now individual vowels.
A. Bode.
O,
Bide.
I,
Bowed.
ow,
Boyd.
oi. Now just the chunks.
A.
E,
Bo.
o, u.
Ba. Ba.
I,
Ba.
a, u.
O.
O,
O.
yeah. Oi, right? So you should be familiar with this, and they are one sound. But regardless of why we are, regardless of the fact that we are using two symbols, they are what we call diphthong, one sound. Then we have unfamiliar IPA symbols for vowels. So these are the symbols that you do not know, you're not aware of these, and you'll have to learn them.
Bid.
For example, I,
Bid.
which we call cap I, like capital I, bid.
Bid.
Then epsilon,
Bed.
E,
Bed.
as in bad, and bad,
Bad.
bad, as in bad, right? This is A and E at the same time, which we produce as a, basically trying to open your mouth for ah, but saying or bud, uh,
Bud. Bud.
bud, hood,
Hood. Hood.
and about. So this one is, you can call it a hat if you want. This one is upsilon, or a horseshoe, and this one is called schwa, 38. It's the shortest vowel in English, most relaxed one or laxed one, which we will learn about, and it's at the start of the word about. About. Also, the following phonetic alphabet symbols do not represent any English sounds. So even though you have them in English spelling, we will not use them ever in English IPA or for English IPA. So we do not use these. Yeah, and you should be practicing. We practiced during our classes. I'll now move on to the sound producing system. Very briefly, I want to explain to you or describe to you how we make these sounds. So we start from the lungs first. Um, Lungs enable us to exhale and so inhale actually and exhale, right? So to make this conversion of oxygen into air and to exhale this air and produce sounds, right? Because sound is, after all, just air pressure fluctuations or changes. So everything starts from air and lungs. It goes up into the larynx, which is this part here below the throat or at the throat part, and pharynx is above larynx, this part here, and above pharynx we have oral cavity and nasal cavity, meaning nasal cavity means nasal hole basically, or oral hole. There is some kind of hole in there where air can go through. So when the air is transmitted from lungs, it goes further into windpipe. This is a windpipe here. From windpipe, it goes through larynx, where our vocal folds are, then goes through pharynx and further into oral cavity and nasal cavity if we let it go into nasal cavity to make a nasal sound such as a m or n or right? So this is just uh, the image of lungs, which are leaning onto a muscle here, which we cannot see, called diaphragm. Diaphragm is very important for breathing in and breathing out. But this is just a link that I provided for you to check out how lungs work. What keeps our lungs inside, or what enables our lungs to move, like for exhaling or inhaling air, are intercostal muscles, right? You don't have to know all of these, just know intercostal muscles and ribs, which you should be familiar with already. All right, and again, as I said, from lungs, air goes through windpipe, larynx, pharynx, oral cavity, and nasal cavity. Nasal cavity, oral cavity, and pharynx are called vocal tract. So the majority of the articulators or organs that we use in speech are there in our vocal tract. And I showed to you this in class, so I won't repeat it here. It was an ultrasound of vocal folds and tongue and a video of the lips. So what you need to know from this one, from phonetics 2, are all English sounds and symbols for those sounds, and what you need to know are the sound producing organs. All right, now we will move on to phonetics 3.